All right. Folks coming in, Michelle? Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
All right. Welcome, everybody. And could we test a few things? One, can you let us know in chat if you can hear us okay, see us okay, and then we can see if we can see you also in chat in terms of what you're saying. Hey, Anthony, good to thank you so much. And then Michelle, do we have Q&A available? Can someone just test Q&A for us just to make sure that, because I'd love for questions to come in via Q&A.
Anthony, that's not a question.
Chat testing. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Good. All right. So just a few things. We're already recording. We'll give it a few minutes here. And while we're waiting, maybe like to 3 after, just to let people keep come in. Michelle, you see people still funneling? Yeah, we do.
Yeah, they're still
but let us know where you're in from and maybe what you're hoping to get out of today's conversation, because we've prepared absolutely nothing. No, I'm kidding. This is I'm excited to be joined with everybody here.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah. Matt Hillens, Rad Matt, it's wonderful to see you. Michael Euhans. Wow, I know a lot of people out here. Hey, Matthew. Were you able to get in and see the content, by the way, in the Cyber Nation? For those of you that were at Write a Boom, I hope.
Oh, somebody's from Auburn, Alabama, Lynchburg. Awesome.
Auburn, nice. So I'm taking it they would not be a Crimson Tide fan, Matt.
Be my supposition. I may be wrong, but that'd be my gut.
Yeah. I'm gonna guess that's not they're not big fans there. All right.
Cisco talks.
Fair enough. All right, Michelle, any further coming you see, or can you chat?
We seem to have leveled off a little there. I'm sure there'll be some coming in, but we could probably.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. As I mentioned, we are recording. So for the questions of, is it being recorded? Will it be sent out? If you have teammates that after you hear the content, you're like, wow, that was actually better than I thought. Yes, you'll be getting that information, all registered and attended. My name is Andrew Morgan. I've had the fine opportunity here, thanks to the folks at SaaS Alerts, to moderate. That would be better, Michelle.
Spit it out.
Today's session.
New tongue just got installed.
Wow. Yeah, I need my AI tongue, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm joined today with Matt Lee, Chip Buck, and Michelle Katz. And I'm going to do intros in a minute, but let me just quickly set the stage for everybody here and kind of talk about why I wanted to do this panel or this conversation. As we all know, early March, the Biden administration came out with their cybersecurity strategy, and then literally a week later, I think it was, give or take, we had, gosh, I'm drawing a blank on our CISA, the lady at CISA.
Jen Easterly.
Thank you, Jen Easterly, show up at Carnegie Mellon and basically give the same dissertation. And interestingly, at Write a Boom, Matt, if you don't recall, when we had Executive Director Wales come in, he was giving a precursor. We didn't know it at the time, but he gave a precursor to a lot of what we heard. And what we hear we heard from him live, and what we're hearing now is, we're shifting, or as Biden said, we're going to rebalance the responsibility to defend cyberspace. And in essence, what has been said is, we're going to, not put responsibility on small to medium business anymore in terms of applications. We're going to ask software vendors to bake in security and be held responsible for any type of malfeasance, for lack of a better word. I'm just, role playing here. And again, we're in the first inning of this statement. But the other thing that caught my eyes and ears in both of those presentations was the term service provider.
Yep.
And you know, again, we'll see what that means, but it's certainly, you know, I certainly didn't want to let that go, because in terms of the fact they're calling out critical infrastructure, and as many as MSPs know, like I see my good friend Matt Cohn's right out there, you know, they're dealing with financial firms, right? You know, so when we look at the critical infrastructure, the 16 sectors, many of those sectors as MSPs, we serve. And therefore, you know, on my question and why I wanted to do this today is, where do you think this is all heading? Now, we're not just going to focus solely on that. We're going to take a kind of a lens back here, and we're going to talk about, you know, how MSPs are going to market, what they probably need to do to be successful going forward, whatever this regulation comes out and however legislation comes out and fall out of this. But I just wanted to give you the backdrop of what kind of led to this conversation, but it's going to be a great one today. So with that, let me introduce our two hosts, Matt Lee, Senior Director of Compliance, Security and Compliance at Pax8, Chip Buck, CTO, co-founder of SaaS Alerts. Matt, tell us a little about yourself for those that may not know you. I think everybody knows you now, but for those that may not know who you are, tell us a little about yourself and what you do there at Pax8.
I meet new MSPs every day, so there's a lot of people don't know me. Real quick, so I started with a break fix MSP in Wichita, Kansas in 2011. We were just under $1 million in revenue and was along in the ride in every different seat that could be there, whether it be technician, project lead, project tech. You know, I didn't do service director, but VCIO and all of that up to CTO and head of security. And we grew to just over 40 million or so in revenue. And anyways, as a result, we ended up selling and I exited, and I was left with this understanding of my habu. And it was after we got a ransomware by REvil and we lost millions in that interaction that once you're touched by that fire, you just kind of find this need to solve other one's pain. And so I've spent my last 2 years at Pax8, where they're, I like to say, kind enough to sponsor my meals, lunches, breakfast, and travel for me to educate and drive change in our industry, both at the service provider level, at the MSP provider level, but also at the software and vendor ISV and SI type space as well. So Pax8 allows me to do this all day and also learn. So, and as Matt said, I'm an extremely shy guy for sure.
Yeah, you are, especially when you have your beard shaved, and great job you did there. All right, glad to see it coming back, Matt. Chip, tell us a little about yourself, and thanks for joining.
Well, the technical journey is starts all the way back in the late 90s, working for what we then called VARs or system integrators. You know, in those days, you could do anything for a buck. There's no such thing as being an MSP. The revenue model was the recurring revenue model was not even a gleam in everyone's eye yet. So, you know, we went out and sold jobs and then completed them, and then took a break, and then sold another one and completed them, took a break. We did everything from pulling cable to, you know, installing systems and switches and building networks and all of it, all the way through the journey. So interesting, Matt, you talk about your first sort of loss. I don't think I've ever told, Andrew, anyone on your calls or even in my own team this story, but my first eureka moment of, man, I really need to get into information security was, I think, 2001, or it might even been as early as 1999. We were experimenting with becoming a service provider, and we were hosting websites on Linux boxes. And then we were like, hey, let's host mail for people. This is before Exchange was available to host. So we're doing our thing. And I noticed one day, one of our servers, we had a user in there, and I tracked this guy back to being somewhere in Germany. And I turned to my mentor at the time and I said, funny enough, his name was Matt. I said, hey, Matt, we've got this account in here. This guy is doing this, and this, and this. And I think I'm going to just blow him away. And he said, he wasn't really paying attention. He was reading something. And just as I'm hitting the delete on this guy's account, I mean, not hitting the delete literally, but you know, dropping his accounts with Linux commands, Matt goes, no! And that was it. So we were in a 48-hour battle keeping this guy out of our systems, because we couldn't unplug him, because we had people's, you know, at that point, rudimentary email services coming in. We were hosting domains, the whole 9 yards. And this guy was in our systems all day long. And that's what actually started my journey on this whole thing. But since then, built an MSP, built a couple different software products and 2 software companies now. So everything has always been focused ever since on, what is it that's the most interesting thing about technology to me? And that's keeping people safe when they're using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool, Chip. It's so funny hearing the late 90s, because that's when I started in the VAR system integrator I was with. I remember us making 60 points on Cisco routers and Cisco 6000s and implementing Citrix WinFrame, if I could date myself.
Oh yeah,
on stuff
absolutely.
like that. And
Hey, we were a Sun Microsystems reseller. Talk about making points.
Yeah.
Right up until the moment when they decided, oh, we don't need the channel anymore. You guys are all gone. We're taking everything our own.
Yeah. Well, they got their fair share for doing that.
You think?
Yeah. All right. So Matt, let's start off with you.
Yeah.
Just, your perspective on Natty strategy. What are your thoughts on it? I'd love to start there.
I'm very happy you used my term for it, right? I was the one that called it the Natty strategy, and I'm sticking by it.
Yeah, I like it.
It's just that it's a strategic document, right? It's talking about the strategies of what we have to do to solve this problem as they understand it as a government. But I want to take it from a different lens of this means the government is waking up to us and waking up to the problem. And it's not like this is something we've never been through before, right? You talked in your opening statement about how the burden of that risk is shifting, that responsibility is shifting to these service providers, to these people that create it. But if we look on the obverse, I buy a new Microsoft tenant and it is insecure by default. And that was actually specifically called out in this national cyber strategy. And it's one of these things where for the longest time, we have been working in the way we do with any new technology. When cars came on the scene, there was no seatbelt. There was no protection. There was no safety testing. Any idiot could go make a car. And if you did, you made the better car, and you're the Dodge brothers and you have Dodge and so, you go through that process. But when they started to try to put pressure to say, hey, we need seatbelts, it created massive backlash and all of these things in the industry. But ultimately, people don't die in car wrecks as often. Ultimately, people can expect that if I buy a Toyota or a Ford, I'm going to have a seemingly similar level of security and protection in place. Well, look at software. If I buy 2 softwares doing the exact same thing, I cannot say that both are equal in security and how they've dealt with their risk and how they've dealt with their supply chain and how they've dealt with their. And so that's where we're at right now. I feel like the National Cybersecurity Strategy actually does an effective job of laying out what I would actually agree with that are some of the paths we have to go. Now, what's the meat of it? How does this turn out legislatively? How does this work out as things go? Like, to your point, we don't know. We won't know. What I can say is you're seeing a shift to where it will be in every business's best interest, whether it be on that critical infrastructure list or whether it be somebody serving customers in the SMB, that there will be a transference of risk and a transference of responsibility to the larger, more educated and more mature party. Just like there are testing facilities for Toyotas, there are, right? Like this exists in other industries. Sorry, go ahead.
Matt, you made me think of something. I didn't think about this, but I love what you just said. I love the analogy. We have a hard enough time. I'm just curious. You made me think of this. We have a hard enough time, often as MSPs getting our customers to do things. Right. MFA as an example.
Yeah.
Right. SaaS Alerts has some great data on it, that 30% of end users, which mirrored, by the way, they had it out before CISA presented it. It mirrors Microsoft Enterprise have MFA fully enabled. The SMB is the same way. Yep. So my question is, if this comes out, is it almost going to give the SMB a sense of, I don't even have to worry about it that much more? Like, is that a possible outcome of this?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think you could definitely say, I don't have to worry about it as much, but in the same way, you're going to find a hard time getting an MSP that'll take business from somebody that won't do those things. Yeah. And so there is a bit of a self-solve where, oh, they'll do this for me. I still don't have to participate. I still don't have to say yes to the inconvenient little bits. I still don't have to. And at some point, and I've seen it already, MSPs will draw a line in the sand and then they'll draw it closer and they'll draw it closer to what their risk tolerance is for customers that don't do what they need to do. Yeah. So yeah, I do agree. I think there could be an additional outlet, but I would say on the obverse of that, there is a lot of ability for the good MSPs to take this data and reframe that conversation with their customer in the benefit of profits and in the benefit of getting these things done. So I think it's double-edged. I think you'll create winners and losers in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. Chip, over to you. You are obviously a software vendor, software manufacturer. You've been in this spot before. and you can do all the right things. I mean, I know firsthand the levels of security controls you have in place, the level of standard, whether it's ISO or, going down the lines of BSIM that you do. But, it would almost seem that the way this is coming out is, hey, I'm the MSP. Chip, by the way, I put in your stuff. I misconfigured it, but hey, you're the software vendor. Do the potential of those types of things lie? Could you see that kind of stuff as fallout of this?
Oh boy, that is such a loaded question. Like, we could stop right here for the rest of this webinar, and probably Matt and I could go back and forth and literally have a long discussion about it. I mean, first off, I think I want to comment on Matt's take on the government's role in this and highlighting the problem. And I think we know from experience looking at government that getting them too far into it and trying to regulate it is not going to do anybody good. I mean, they have a hard enough time maintaining security in their own products. And they have some counter incentives, quite frankly, to what the rest of us think of security every day. I mean, all of the nation state actors, including our own, hack the crap out of people whenever they want to, whenever they feel the need to. And let's be honest, guys at our level are practically powerless to do anything about that. So there's a different set of things going on here. But in terms of, holding software vendors accountable for, you're calling them misconfigurations by the user, but there's also the whole issue of bugs.
Yeah, I mean,
this is a debate we have internally at SaaS Alerts all the time. Our very, very first product release, there was nothing for the MSP product user to configure. Absolutely nothing. We made all the decisions about what severity was of events, what events you're going to track. There's nothing left to chance. And we did that very intentionally. Number one, we were building it as an MVP to get it out and building for the lowest common denominator, the absolute least sophisticated person you could want. But as time goes on, people that are more sophisticated begin using your product and they want choice and they want the ability to change this and do that. And, I want to ignore this stuff over here, or I only want to ignore it for some people, but then I might forget to unignore it if I choose to not have a process in place to check on these things. Like, there's a really complicated, symbiotic relationship between product vendor, MSP user of the product, Chip, and their customer.
You got to stop reading my journal, Chip, because I have a theory called the middle theory that I speak about. And it really just says a restatement of capitalism in this force around technology, that the product being made will never exceed the maturity of the demanding entity, right? If I have a customer that's of low maturity, my product isn't going to be rewarded for being much better than that, right? Like, that's kind of this capitalism aspect. So software providers in general have made to that common denominator, have actually built software in some ways where that common denominator said, you know what, maybe a new feature is more beneficial than you fixing a bug. Maybe capitalism rewards me for that next feature much more than it does this security thing nobody cares about. Yeah. And that's the environment that we've built in, this petri dish for the last 20 years of software.
Forever. I mean, it goes great statement. It goes straight to the theory of information assurance, right? It's you have a balancing act between accessibility and usability versus security and privacy. Like, you can't have 100% of one or the other. Otherwise you have a system that can't function. So, one of our goals, and I hope this is the goal for a lot of products, not just SaaS Alerts, but and this is not original thinking, right? But one of our goals is we're trying to give the MSP tools to make the customer more a part of their own security journey. I think, many businesses, small businesses especially, think that they're absolved from responsibility because they're paying someone else to deliver them computers, install software, set up 365 form, whatever else. And they think, I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. The MSPs on their part, especially new ones, are thinking, well, Microsoft is secure. They're doing this. Like, these guys don't have the benefit of reading the last 30 years worth of Microsoft TechNet articles and system releases and vulnerability releases to realize that there's still a bunch that are open. Like, even right now today, there are flaws in the 365 architecture that are security flaws that Microsoft knows about, that they haven't fixed yet, that they've sent out notices for, and not enough people really look at that every day, and they can't. Even the MSP themselves, I'm not sure that they can cover all of it. Matt's comment earlier, you buy a 365 tenant today and out of the box, by default, it's insecure. I'd go a step farther than that. It's not by default, it's by design. Because right now the culture of Microsoft and Google is to blame is, hey, we're going to sell you this low end system that's going to give you the very basic stuff. And if you want more, including more security, you have to pay more.
Yeah.
You know, they need to get into the marketplace with something that is going to drive some sales. And they have competitors and they're very price sensitive. So they naturally do that. Okay, well, now that you've been with us for a little while, we're going to try and upsell you. I think this is where the product vendors like us, like Microsoft and others, and the MSPs have to come together. You know, we have to help people understand, listen, I know you think you can get Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 for $9.95 a user, but that's not adequate for someone that's actually trying to protect data.
Here's the baseline, right? And here's the things we can
pay for more and do more with it and allow us to configure it with you.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk more about it, but I think, you know, in terms of what productivity suites actually mean to a business in terms of their, you know, risk to revenue and the operations of that business, the importance, right, to revenue is far understated. And it's just inherent, like, oh, well, it's just mail, or it's just a productivity suite. And we're going to talk more about that, Chip and Matt. But so just a quick follow-up, Chip, you know, when we think about, not going to delve too far in this, but when we think about security controls, pick a framework. Typically, your second one is going to be around software inventory. And, you know, historically, you know, before we really started focusing on SaaS, you know, our RMM did a decent job, not 100%, but a decent job at getting software applications and inventory. Well, we know now, whether it happens to be shadow IT, so much of the way a company generates revenue, so much of their critical systems, right, live up in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so we don't have systems, right? Our RMM doesn't say, oh, by the way, you have this over here, this over here, this over here. Inherently, we don't have, the types of applications the enterprise does to track those software products. And so my question is it, you know, interviewing accounts payable, right? Because, and I say that in tongue in cheek, but I also say it in reality that, you know, we've got to think deeper. Last thing I'll say here is like Eric Woodard, who runs an awesome MSP out in Utah. You know, he's like, one of our biggest struggles right now is, you know, inventory, because he's a CIS zealot. And he's like, you know, how do I get inventory there? So, you know, with someone that actually is in the SaaS business like yourself, I really love your thoughts here, Matt, Chip, because I think it's really important.
Well, first off, you know, how ironic is it that just about the time, you know, in the Windows NT 2000, you know, Active Directory world, just about the time that everybody figured out you could create a group policy to prevent your users from installing anything on their machines, along comes SaaS. And now it's just like, okay, now what? So look, fortunately, there's been a proliferation of shadow IT products out there that are going to help track that down. I do think AP, you know, you say that tongue in cheek, but I actually do think going
I did it
is a really, really smart way of going about it. That's one of the ways that we self-audit. But remember, tools like Google and Microsoft allow you to go drive directly in and look at every single time somebody's using OAuth to use one of those cloud products to connect. There's a record of it. We surface that in SaaS Alerts. There's lots of other products that surface that. Just looking at it at the product level, like the third-party product level, I don't think is enough. You know, that should be a regular part of the MSP's review with their customers, or even teach, you know what, here's what I would do if I'm an MSP again. It just came to me now. I would have my technical guys teach the bookkeepers, the controllers, the AP people at my client companies how to look for those things in Active Directory. I'd give them enough control. You don't need to make them a global admin to go see this. I'd let them go and do the audit for them. That's the best way to do it, because those are the people who are watching the money. They're not going to catch all the free stuff. You know, that's where you need the third party tools. And and whether it's us or somebody else, it makes no difference in the world. But it is a big problem, and it's also a big data leakage problem. So there's also policy configuration control that you can add in this. Today in Google Workspace or 365, you can prevent users from OAuthing in and accepting the permission requests, because when you log in and connect any app up, you have that whole list. Here's what it's going to do. It's going to read every single email you write. It's going to SharePoint. It's going to do this, this, and this. Set the
Jim, you triggered me on something. Just so you just triggered me on something. So I demonstrated modern attacks facing the workforce in kind of in our boot camp yesterday. And one of the demonstrations I did was a poisoned evil enterprise app, where this application is only made for me to steal your data, right? And so it's an OAuth app that users sign in with their Microsoft account, and your statement of you should go and change that. So they cannot create those. And so they have to go through admin to do that. And those things, it's a great call out, man. It's 100% accurate. So, and it helps you regulate that shadow ID from that perspective, at least from those login sites. So,
yeah. But you're also talking about the case, Andrew, where the horse is out of the barn. And I think AP is going to the AP manager is a great start for that, but teaching people how to dig in and look for the free stuff.
Yeah. Good stuff. Matt, it makes me think right away, because you and I are fans of CIS, but if you think Control 2 and you think SaaS applications, it makes you think of something called service provider management, which was added in CIS version 8.
Yep.
Which is a great one. But when you and kind of serendipitous that it's out there now. And again, the Biden administration says, oh, by the way, we're going to make software vendors, in essence, we're going to rebalance, make them more responsible. And the service providers that use and or recommend, again, that's what we're kind of reading in the tea leaves there in those in that statements. That is not a cheap endeavor. And what I mean by that, if you're an MSP, and again, I'll look, my good friend Matt Hillendrath out here, they run a incredible MSP with some very sophisticated customers and very sophisticated software platforms. That is not a cheap endeavor to go, okay, well, let's now make sure that this software manufacturer, let's look at, their audits, their pen tests, their controls, and make sure that, we're going to stand behind the solutions that. How does an MSP approach, if you still were an MSP, how do you approach this? Is it a project? Do you extend onboarding? Do you get my thoughts here? Like this is not a small task.
So there's a couple of things that might come into this, and I won't get super long-winded on it, right? But we are talking about Control 2.1, right? Being able to say, hey, have an inventory of all your software, and at some point catalog what its risk is to you as an organization, right? You're talking about a business impact analysis at that point. And to Chip's earlier point, I'm going to go start with that accounts payable person and gather that data. But to this question of, now I know the list of those software providers, and let alone the project of doing it for me as an MSP with a fairly static set of those providers, right? I think Iconic, we had 67, I think, that we identified over time. But when you go down to your client base, how many of those thousands of different line of business applications, software providers, vendors, partners, third parties would you have to be trying to extend that capability to from a vetting perspective? That, let alone, do you as an MSP even have a good way to vet Control 15? How do I even do a good job of knowing what you guys are doing as a vendor or a software provider or a service provider? And how you're handling that, to your point of, the policies, the procedures, the documentation, the evidence. I think that this is going to probably create a capitalistic answer to this that is a bit outside of the MSP. In fact, I know of 2 or 3 projects that are already doing cataloging of these vendors from that perspective and what their risk is and how their posture looks. And this goes straight to the question Chad kind of made a statement in the comments of, I think, I don't want to paraphrase him, but he says, will this open the door for stricter vendor risk assessments required by MSPs or the government, or some standalone compliance standard outside that might be referenced, right? Something like a gold seal of approval with a software vendor and a cadence and trust measure, maybe levels to it. That question as a point is I think absolutely on point. In the interim, however, and as these things are not available, how does one manage service providers at this point? I think it has to start with just certain criterion. And then how do you bill for it? This gets into something Chip and I are talking about before the show, which is we're starting to see a shift from a infrastructural view of security that's tied to speeds, feeds, computers, those things that we talked about earlier, to one that's much more, centric of identity. But as also a result of that, in Chip's point, we used to put cards in machines and IRQ ports and do all that stuff to make the computers work. That all got commoditized away. Effectively in SaaS, what Chip was talking about is find the apps people are using. You know why they're using them? Because all you got to do is click, sign in with Microsoft. Right. And so you're getting to that commoditization, I think, is a shift in how MSPs charge the same $200-300 a head or whatever it may be per seat to do that. It's a shift in what we're actually doing. Yeah. As to those ancillary things, I probably see those being projects. I don't think, unless you made it a monthly, vCISO type offering or a monthly type of consumable offering, it would be project work per vendor as an onboard. And then I think MSPs would be building little pockets about Patterson Dental or about this EagleSoft or about whatever it may be, right? That's the software. And then going, oh, next customer. Okay, now I can apply what I've already learned. Well, there's people doing that right now as a capitalist.
Matt, does it lend, maybe a thing for, you and I were talking Pax8, but does it lend almost the potential for a community-based approach? Where as MSPs, we could have this, in essence, wiki open source, like updating. So we're not all individually doing this. Like, hey, if I'm in financial services, it's, hey, here's all the current vetting of this. If I'm, here's the MSP tools. I don't know, just a thought.
It does and doesn't in my mind, right? So think of it this way. The other thing, so Chad needs to be with me chatting right now, apparently, because I totally get this dude. But, the other statement was the barrier to entry as an MSP is literally writing a sticky note with MSP on it, sticking it on the wall, and then go getting a business license. That's literally what it takes, right? That is zero barrier to entry. So the problem with a crowdsourced type thing is you assume the crowd is of equal or semi-equal capabilities of understanding the challenge and problem ahead. That's not the case in the MSP industry. In fact, for every Matt and Chad that's out there, there's 20 others that have barely even heard the word CIS. There's 20 others that are barely even talking about these things. So would you want them being the arbiter of what a business's value is? And right.
Yeah, but I don't think they would do it. I don't think they would do it.
Good argument. Agreed. Yeah. Agreed.
But that's as fair. James is saying, and I just asked the question, who's doing it? But like in some of the compliance or regulated, customers, it's part of it. And, Chip, while I have you here, I think I'm hoping this gets better, but I think equally frustrating for MSPs that are doing good due diligence. A lot of times they'll go to, an MSP software vendor and go, hey, our customer, right, has given us this questionnaire for their audit of all the tools that's sitting on their systems. So we're coming to you, and like, whether it takes a year and a day to get the answers back, or there's not a good security center. I mean, what are your thoughts on this in terms of, the challenges there even?
Well, I'm going to maybe go in reverse order, because you just threw a new one in when you said it takes a year and a day to get the answers back. If it takes more than 48 business hours, they're almost kind of already off the list of a vendor that you're going to use, because it means they haven't thought about it, done it. We get vendor assessments into SaaS Alerts every single week. We have a full-time, executive level compliance officer whose job it is to make sure that we're doing everything we need to do. We've touched on this topic on the periphery in previous conversations, Andrew, where MSPs themselves need to be looking at, hey, you know what? We're a service provider ourselves. We should have a SOC 2. And guess what happens when you go through that process of getting certified to some standard? I don't care if it's SOC 2 or if it's ISO or what have you, pick something and work on it. You follow out of that with a body of work for your own business, then now you can turn around and sell to your customers, or at least make the argument to your customer, you should be using me, because among the other things I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you a checklist that says when you're going to buy a new piece of software, or when you're going to sign up for a new vendor to deliver your bottled water into your building, and be near your filing cabinets, I'm going to give you a checklist to vet them. Like, that's all stuff that we should be thinking about all the time, because the security risks are everywhere. All of our technology is completely accessible. Individual end users who don't lock down their devices and Bluetooth and this and that and the other thing, you never know where this is coming from. So the MSPs themselves have the opportunity to to prove their own value through, hey, we ourselves are certified and we follow protocol. We're going to teach you how to do it. And we make sure that we are ready to do that with all the vendors that we use.
Yeah.
Now, to Matt's point, I think it's a hard sell that this becomes, you know, a community sourced issue item. I wouldn't, if I wanted to know something new about a vendor, about a new vendor, if I wanted to find out whether or not they were certified and they were trustworthy, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable going to the community and saying, you know, you guys just tell me if it's okay. Like I need more than that. Like I just need more than that to get there.
And maybe I misheard. I'm saying like maybe a lot of the core trust center information. Oh, it's here. It's, you know, and then you ask your individual things. That was really where I was going with it, to kind of make a wiki of, oh, you know, here's the URLs for this,
I follow
this
what you're
per
saying.
vendor. And then, you know, the rest of your due diligence certainly is on you. Matt, so I have this hypothesis I want to run by you and get your thoughts. I have a theory, and I've run it by a lot of MSPs, but I'm not going to tell you what they say. Here's the hypothesis, because I think it's limiting. I want to set the stage. I think it's limiting our ability as MSPs to charge more, to charge the right price, to really change our self-image, if you will, as a Gary Pica term, as who we are and our value. And that is because I think we are an IT-centric business group or industry, meaning we look at a customer or a prospect through the lens of infrastructure, whether that's in the internal, in the cloud. We look at, you know, obviously things like, you know, their basic security controls, BCDR, technology steering, things like that, versus you can't talk about any of that stuff. You have to talk about what drives the business, what processes, people, functions. If we took that approach, you know, would we see a change in revenue and price per, you know, I just love your thoughts there.
100%. I mean, you know, your hypothesis, I think, hits the nail on the head in the sense that as MSPs, when we went through those first days of going from break fix, or even in your SI days back, Chip, in that system integrator space, it was very transactional and very nerdy bits, right? It was we're the smart people, we'll get you taken care of. And then that changed to, we're the smart people, we'll keep you running, we'll keep your computer up, it'll be a monthly recurring thing, we'll do all the smart guy and gal stuff. It was always about efficiency. It was always about the cost per head and the efficiency that could be extrapolated. Thanks, Matt. And then the efficiency that could be extrapolated from that, right? And so we got really good at RIM, reactive hours per endpoint per month. And we got really good at the ability to have enough people on our W2 multiplier and our profitability. We were really healthy in those things. But not often during that time were we actually building strategic value and capabilities for those companies, right? And as you saw, that commoditization initially created the need for VCIOs. Right? The need to actually start doing it. But even then, the VCIOs were talking about computer replacements. They're talking about, right? Like they were still saying in that technology. Well, along with that, security is shifting. I have a belief that security is shifting from a very infrastructural, we saw a virus on this machine, we think there's something, let's deal with this machine, let's deal with this server, let's isolate this network component, let's do this, to a very non-infrastructural and very identity-centric, right? Phyllis Lee says, your user's network ends where your user's fingertips land, which might be Starbucks or wherever it is. So I feel like we're shifting to this understanding that is that Chip Buck, and should Chip Buck have access to this webinar and have access to this data and these humans? That's a different focus, because the attack surface and plane is gone from this understanding of nerdy bits, right, to let's just enable business. And I say all that to say, I feel like that commoditization makes the technology easier. I mean, if we all played a game and launched Angry Birds together, how many of us think Angry Birds doesn't launch on our phone? Near zero, right? Out of 100. And the reason I say that is what's shifting. So we need to now be able to do the one thing. If we both have a hockey team and they have the same size players, they have the same capabilities on skating, they have the same basic skills, how do I beat you? I coach you better. I do things to make you better than your competition with the same sticks. Well, if we're all using Microsoft Teams, or we're all using Google for its things, how do I make you better? If we're all using the same SaaS apps, how do I make you better? And that's where I think the shift is. And so if we now start talking about, instead of, risk and, oh my God, no, let's talk about profit, right? Alyssa Miller, famous CISO, gets up on the stage and says at Write a Boom last year, no, not at Write a Boom, wherever it was, Wild West Hacking Fest. And she says, we talk about the business language as risk. That's crap. Business language is profit, raw, unadulterated profit. And more so, the business owner already owns all the risk. They're already in business. They're already doing it. Right. And so you have to shift that language to, no, we're going to make your business be able to be better when you communicate with your clients. They're going to have a better sign-up experience. They're going to get billed more accurately. They're going to be able to drive forward. We're going to make sure that you have more resiliency and you can keep doing these. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
Well,
Chip's going to hammer this too, but
and I'm going to go to Chip with this kind of with this lead in, and it's almost like, the IT centric world is, hey, we did a vulnerability scan and you have 8,000 vulnerabilities and the CVEs are this, and this, versus, hey, you have a material weakness in your accounting function or the ERP. There is structural weakness that we're concerned with. You mentioned that you drive, give or take, $250,000 of revenue every single day out of that. If we don't take action on this, the impact based on typical downtime, 16 days or so, is X.
Yeah.
What do what are your thoughts? Do you want us to address? It's a very different conversation in terms.
It puts it in the language they can understand. That's what they're already talking about, right? Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, well, Chip, go
ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, if the lion's share of MSPs are IT centric, and their view of, clients and prospects is, when we're, they're having conversations on, something that isn't driving business, right? It's more about tech and this and that. Like, I guess what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think this does in the sales cycle? Because you've been, quote unquote, in, people try to sell you, fair? Like, sure. And you see the differences probably between someone that's talking about your business functions, like maybe like, efficiency of coding and, building secure code and what that means.
Reading my email?
Probably.
No. Yeah.
I think it makes the look, if all an MSP can do is talk about the tech side of things, I think it makes the sales cycle very short and it ends in a bad ending for the MSP. So, but at this point in the game, anybody who's in business for any length of time has heard it all before when it comes to, I'm going to go with the nerdy bits. I love it, Matt. Like that.
Thank you.
They've heard it all before. Everybody that's come in and tried to pitch them, either to become an MSP client for the very first time or to move to a different one, they've listened to all this before, and some of them have been listening to it for decades. Oh, we need to do a network assessment, a security assessment, and we need to evaluate your firewalls, and we're going to put in, Splunk to monitor your data, and then come back in a month and tell you, like, they don't care about that. They already have someone who's pitched them on that. So the first 15 minutes of the conversation has to be spent in, what do you guys do? Like, I get it. It's plumbing out here, but how do you sell? Who do you sell to? Are you in a vertical market with this? And how does your salespeople share information with people? And you get back, oh, well, they just send bids out with a link, or to a Microsoft document. Okay, that's great. Is it a link back to SharePoint, or is it an actual file that you get? Is the file have a password? Do you realize that your competitors are all looking at the bids that you send out because of the way you send them out? Like, there's a little bit of business knowledge, which I think much of the MSP community at the leadership level, the owners of MSPs, the executive guys, you guys are the same kind of business people that your salespeople are selling to. So, what the questions are to ask, where the danger lies, what you're afraid of as a business owner, losing money, losing employees, losing valuable data. That's all the stuff that if your salespeople are sharing with someone in an interview to get a client, hey, we need to know about your business, because security and technology are customized for every single company. I can sell to 5 different electricians, you know, in the same city, and they're each going to have a different need. And yes, they start with the foundation of the same thing, but we're going to have to customize each piece of this for you. And that's the way we protect you the most. That's the way we provide you the most productivity. That's the way we help add to your bottom line. We can't necessarily save you money on the IT piece. In fact, I personally would say this in this interview. I'd say, I'm going to be here to convince you that you're going to spend more money in IT. And by spending more money in IT, you're going to make more money in the long run. More is going to come to your bottom line.
Well, we on our SASE call every Thursday, that, you know, I found, and you can Google this. If you Google IT governance and profitability, there's 2 studies out there, one by MIT, and I'm drawing a blank on the other college, but these are significant colleges. It might be Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, it was Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, around IT governance and profitability, 20% more profit for companies with strong IT governance. So like, okay, so I have to spend, I don't know, 10% more, 5% more, whatever. I mean, the profitability is staggering, and it makes sense. You know, when you look at a culture that, you know, cares about what they're actually doing.
You know why, Andrew, and I don't want to get us off topic. It is, if you worked for Trimble Alltrack and you're selling to a construction company, you are not selling a GPS tracker. You are selling the understanding of your logistics of when your concrete truck is going to arrive for the next concrete truck, so they can be done pumping and moving out, so that the concrete doesn't sit in too long and not meet standards. And those are the things you've got to learn about the business before you have a conversation to say, hey, you know what, we need to get this really cool piece of hardware, software, whatever it may be, combination in. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Those people that have done that better have a better operation flow. The trucks don't waste. We don't have to go back and remake batches of concrete. We don't have to scrap partial jobs because we didn't meet a pressure spec, or right. Those are the things where they're more profitable because of that governance.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Let me think about MSPs, right? Ask yourself as an MSP, when you think about who the most profitable MSPs are, if you've gone to a conference, if you've looked online, if you've heard or talked, look at the ones that are most profitable. I guarantee you they are the ones that have done full SOC 2s, aligned to frameworks, have strong policies, culture. Guarantee you those are the ones that are the highest price per seat, highest profitability, et cetera, et cetera.
And there's one more piece of this, Andrea, that I'll bet those MSPs do, and I'll tie it back into the customers. They invest in their people. They invest in training. They invest in technology. And this is the same argument that the MSP needs to make to the customer that they have now or the prospect. And that is, you need to stop thinking about IT as a cost center, like you're just buying computers and throwing them away every 3 years. It's part of your human resources component of you investing in your people. You know, you give them paid vacations, you give them medical leave, you pay for their Blue Cross Blue Shield, you do all these other things to attract and keep good people. Why wouldn't you give them the best productivity tools? You're hiring a knowledge worker. We'll give them the tools to be the best knowledge worker and to use that stuff well. Like, that's the argument. You shouldn't be thinking about this, that, oh, I only spend $80, you know, a month, amortized on each employee because I'll buy them a laptop every 3 years. Well, that's the wrong outlook.
Especially when you have a BEC for 500 grand, Chip, that computer really becomes irrelevant very quickly.
Yeah, it's superfluous number versus the 500,000, right? That 1,000 versus 500.
So sorry, I didn't mean to drift you off.
No, it's great. I just have to say, because you said it, we are a huge fan. No, Matt's a huge fan in terms of speaking about training for MSPs. I know we're off on a tangent, but I'm just going to cap it off with this. We're huge fans of John Strand and all they do at Anti-Siphon. And at Right of Boom, one of the people stood up in the first year and was like, hey, well, if we train our people, you know, we might lose them to the competition, you know, and then what? And he's, you know, and the another person stood up and he said, you know, he talked about his culture and why he is all for training all his people becoming as best, you know, in security as they possibly can. He's like, what if you don't train your people and they stay?
Right. Exactly.
you know?
Yeah. That's a good one.
And I just thought
You
it
know
was
what happens then? You get
Huh?
all the bad people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not bad as in their
Yeah.
bad
The
human
not
beings.
A players side of things. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just thought it was great. So Matt, how do we shift the culture here? You know, we have an industry that's IT centric, and you know, I'd love it if we could flip a switch. But is there a way that you've seen culture shift? Is it doing the things we're talking about?
It's shifting on us, right? And what I mean by that is you're seeing a system of rewarding the winners and disincentivizing the losers in that. And so I think as we start seeing this understanding of security being endemic, the way we're delivering things being part of that process needing to exist, the ability to actually apply a framework, those things, that's like any maturing industry, right? To some extent. And so I think the ones that start talking about business centric things instead of the, nerdy bits to keep that up and are talking about the nerdy profits, right, are going to be the more successful. And the ones that are following those frameworks by Carnegie Mellon's statement or by others, to your point, they're more profitable. Well, that's what's really cool about capitalism. We love to correct. It does always correct, right? There's definitely some scars, but it always corrects.
Yeah, it's
And
really
so I
good
feel
stuff.
like that's what's changing. Yeah, I'll keep it at brevity on that. But I think
Yeah,
our
no,
culture
it's
is
really
changing
good.
for us.
Yeah. We're, in other words, you either change or you're a dinosaur, really, aren't you?
Yep. We're at that point.
Yeah. And we're seeing it. So Chip, if we did shift, and the ones that have shifted and they are being business centric, get alignment into, what drives the business, do you think there's less pushback for, hey, by the way, it's going to be 300, 350 a seat because we do have to do due diligence on your software vendors. We do have to do inventory. I do have to talk to Jim or Mary in accounts payable. I got to go through all that stuff. That takes time, energy, but does it change? Do you think there's less pushback?
There's a two-part answer to this question. The first part is that I think MSPs need to become more selective in who they want as a client. So when you have, a customer prospect that you're talking to about this, and, you can tell by the look of their face, the look of their business, the look in their employees, these guys are not going to be in business in 5 years. How much energy do you want to really invest in them? And those are the guys that are going to push back the most. Somebody who's really running a serious business, you can have a serious conversation with. When you walk in as an MSP sales, sales leader, or the MSP business owner who's doing his own sales, and you present yourself as a technology business consultant, not a tech consultant, you're leading with a whole different foot. And you at least can get someone's ear to the point where they're not going to give you pushback of, boy, all these things you're saying are a pile of crap. I just want to keep spending $80. Will you get them to 350 or 300 right away? Maybe not. Not in the first conversation, but you're going to gain their respect that you're actually interested in their business. And that's the point. It's easy to take someone on that journey when what you're really doing is you're convincing them that you're going to become their partner in the technology side of their business. They don't know anything about that. They know everything about their other stuff. You're going to become their business partner, and you're going to help them grow. And you'll be there for them to turn to 2 years, 3 years down the line when all this stuff changes. And let's not forget, that's part of the equation too. They're also paying for you, the MSP, to stay on top of a changing landscape that's moving way faster than the business they're probably in, to be candid. I mean, all of us in the end are kind of on the cutting edge, especially our focus, on these calls is really around security, but everything's a moving target. So I don't know, how do I think of this like, you can't go in there presenting gadgets like you're a circus clown. Like, that's not what we're doing, right?
You heard it here first.
You got to go in there like you're the ringmaster.
Yeah.
And all of these bits and pieces that are moving around, you've got a handle of, and you're making them work for you.
Yeah. And I think those conversations, Matt, I'd love your thoughts. I mean, you talked a lot about MSPs on what you're seeing out of per seat charge for MSPs that are doing this well, number one, but number two, so your thoughts there, what you're seeing. And then number two, they don't talk about gadgets and gadgets, and don't talk about MFA. And what I mean by that is, yes, MFA will come up, but it's not used in the same regard. Again, it's used in the materiality of risk to the business, of risk to revenue. Your thoughts on both of those?
Yeah, you're seeing it grow really rapidly. And you also see this aspect that kind of ties back to Chad's point of how easy it is to be an MSP, right? No other profession, my attorney, my doctor, right? My CPA, none of those professions do they have to convince me of their capabilities before I take their advice as valuable to my capabilities, right? So that's the first barrier that we're having to overcome, right? Because you have MSPs are not necessarily seen as that trusted advisor in that regard. But I do think that as you see that continue to shift, you've seen MSPs really rocket this. Like I met an MSP in Australia and actually another one in the US that was doing similar things where they were defining an H1 stack. And they were just saying, here's our tech, here's what we're going to roll out. And in H2, they may redefine that stack. They may add, it may cost more, it may not cost more, things might change. They do a 2023 H2, second half of the year stack, or maybe once a year, depending on the situation. But every time they change, they tell their client, you can never be more than 3 back. If you're ever 3 back, you're obviously not staying up with us and you don't want to deal with the change that's in front of you. And they've crushed it with that. You know what their adoption was? It was huge. Matt Horning said the same thing. They don't say no. Right? When I sent out my first email to say, I'm going to turn on email backup for $3 a user, we're going to start that for 15 days. We're going to start billing you in 30 days. Let me know if you want out. Nobody said no. 3 people wanted to meet and talk about it. 2 said yes. 1 said no. So I had 1/100th that said no to that. They're looking for us to be prescriptive. They're looking for us to tie it into that business in a lot of ways too. So I do think that's the piece. But then on the second aspect of this, Andrew, you're starting to see people actually talk about the business, that concrete truck, that operation, that ability to maybe if we had a system that we might need to spend $300,000 on, we could make your operations flow better. We could make you not have trucks having to go back and get scrapped. But the only way they know that is if they're asking about what loses money for them. What are they afraid of, to your point, Andrew? So yeah, we're starting to see MSPs tie to frameworks. I mean, I've had people go through my class. Matt's a great example of people that are crushing into this. Like, I'm going to use a framework as the way I talk about it. And I'm going to start talking to people about business functions, not tech. And if they want to know about the tech, I'll gladly lean in. But otherwise, the words I'm going to say are business, 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 sign here. Right.
Yeah.
Like, anyways, yeah, they're crushing it in that regard.
Very cool. You know, I had a bunch more questions. I know we're only a few minutes to the top of the hour. By the way, Matt Hillentrad asked about the MIT study. There's various ones. I put a URL in chat if you're interested in reading about that. Chip, I'm just wondering if you could close us out. You have a very interesting lens now of, gosh, I think north of 1 million M365 users, and you see a lot of stuff. Maybe just, I don't know if you could share either a success story or a success story on, like, what are you seeing these days, and what are you catching, and you know, what are some of the newest, I guess, I don't know if it's new, it's tried and true, but maybe just kind of close us out here with what you're seeing. And
well, the success stories are definitely, you know, MSPs who are coming and using tools like SaaS Alerts, identifying the vulnerabilities and even the active compromises in their customers' tenants, and fixing them and getting to the bottom of it. Those are saves, and we love them because it saves a lot more than just the MSP. It saves the customer, it saves their employees, often the customer's customers. Like, there's a whole stream of people involved in every single compromise. Every day we see, you know, things that make me upset from the standpoint of how is there still so much of this going on? We are always talking about MFA. That's definitely an issue. We're constantly seeing what I call stale accounts. That's a term that I think we kind of coined, that are just sitting out there forever. No one logs into them. So they are definitely a huge security risk, because you could have someone in there actively having compromised it, playing with it for months.
Which is a safeguard in Control 5, right? Like that's absolutely tied back to a framework. Disable dormant accounts. Yeah.
The file sharing stuff that you hear me harping on all the time. This is one of my biggest gripes with Microsoft. Microsoft makes it the easiest to do the worst thing.
Yeah, to share as a human.
This link with no expiration.
Yeah.
And I mean, honest to God, if they're really concerned about security, they would just get rid of that feature, period. Like, you couldn't share an anonymous link unless it had an expiration date. I get the reason to do it once in a while. You know, if it were me, if I'm an MSP, I'm saying to my customers, we're turning that off. You can never share an anonymous link with anybody. If you really need to share something to the world, we're going to teach you how to build a SharePoint site that can be safely, from which people can safely retrieve documents that really should be public. Like public documents belong on your website. They don't belong in your file system. So, but look, it gets better, and then it turns around and gets worse. You know, we'll go through stretches where things would get better. And as you know, Andrew, in the past 6 weeks, we've seen this proliferation of token harvest attacks. Like all of a sudden, the hacking community has figured out this vulnerability that's been out there.
I demonstrated Devil Jinx in my demo yesterday, right? It's been out 8 years. 8 years.
This thing's been out there for a while, but all of a sudden, enough script kiddies have figured out that this is a new way for them to harvest stuff, like Matt, and it's popping up everywhere. And it's not just Microsoft. People are doing it with Google. They're doing it with any app that uses a browser token to keep a session open. So, you know, so we'll figure out a way to help people see those better. And Microsoft maybe will figure out a way to tighten it down, or administrators will say, you know what, session tokens, no, we're not doing that. We're going to revoke tokens every 4 hours and make people log in again. I mean, look, that's what we do at our company, by the way. And you can ask any of our people that, you know, they were kind of irritated with us when we did that. They're like, why do I have to keep logging in? Well, because that's the only way we can really stay tight. So it'll get better, and then something else will come along. So, you know, that's the main message, I think, to everybody out here from a selling perspective. There's always something coming along, and what you're being paid to do is be an expert. You're not being paid to plug in computers anymore. You're being paid to stay out in front and protect people from the things they don't know.
Amen. And protect their risk to their revenue. Really what it is, their business function. Matt, Chip, that was awesome. Michelle, thank you for the support. I know we're at the top of the hour here. I'll let everybody go. Really appreciate everybody's involvement, chat, and questions. Wishing everybody a fantastic week. Join us on the Sassy call if you can, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Make it a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Andrew. Bye, Michelle.
Nice chat.
Bye, guys.
Everyone.